All right, well, we have the law of sines, and we know that in order to use the law of sines, we need to have at least one angle and the side opposite. But we can also use the law of cosines. So when we use the law of sines, we have to have angle, angle, side, angle, or side, side, angle in order to use it effectively. But what about side, angle, side, or side, side, side? What would we do in those cases? Well, we can use the law of cosines. So the law of cosines looks like this. It's kind of an intimidating equation, but once you start to use it, you'll see that it's really a little bit more simple than it appears. So it says that if you take one side and square it, it will equal to the other two sides squared minus 2 times those sides times the cosine of the angle that is opposite the side you started with. So if you take a look at this equation, you can write it in 3 different ways depending on which side you would like to solve for. Note that if you are solving for side A, you will use the cosine of A. If you're solving for side B, you will use the cosine of B. And if you are solving for side C, you're going to use the cosine of C. So here are the law of cosines. All right, let's look at an example. It says solve triangle ABC with A is 11, C is 14, and the measurement of angle B is 34. All right, so I'm going to write in everything I know. And I'm going to look to see what kind of a configuration I have, because if I can use the law of sines, it's a much easier equation. Well, I have an angle, but I don't know the side opposite it, so I can't use the law of sines. So the configuration I have is side, angle, side. So I'm going to use my law of cosines. I'm going to choose the one that's b squared because that's the side that I can solve for. I'm going to plug in all the information I know. So I know A is 11, I know C is 14, and then I'm going to say minus 2 times 11 times 14, and then the cosine of 34. I'm just going to simplify the numbers. I'm going to square 11 squared and 14 squared, add those together, and then multiply negative 2 times 11 and 14 to get negative 308. Please remember that I cannot subtract 317 minus 308 because it is being multiplied by the cosine of 34. So I'm going to first do the math, what 308 times the cosine of 34 is, and now I can subtract the numbers. Don't forget, though, that I haven't solved for b here. I've actually solved for b squared. So I need to take the square root of this answer, and I'm going to get plus or minus 7.85. But once again, we are talking about the side length of a triangle, so I know it can't be negative, so my answer is just simply 7.85. But it asked us to solve the whole triangle, and all we did was find side B. But now that we know side B, I can now use my law of sines to finish this up. I'm only going to use my law of cosines when I have to, because once again, the law of sines is a much easier equation. So I'm going to say the sine of C over 14 is the sine of 34 over 7.85. I could just as easily have started with the sine of A over 11. It doesn't really matter. I just happen to choose to do C first. So I know the sine of C equals this. Put this in my calculator. I know the sine of C is 0.9910, but again, I don't want to know what the sine of C is. I want to know what the measurement of angle C is. So if I'm trying to find an angle measure, I'm going to have to use my second sine or my arc sine on my calculator. And I know that the measurement angle C is 86 degrees. Well, now that I know what B and C are, all I have to do is subtract those two from 180 to find out what the measurement of A is. And so now I know the measurement of A is 60 degrees. And let's look at another example. So solve triangle ABC with A is 12, B is 27, and C is 20. Well, here now, I don't know any of the angles. So I certainly cannot use the law of sines, but I can use the law of cosines. So once again, I have side, side, side. So let's plug in everything we know into this equation. Well, I know A, I know B, and I know C. The only thing I don't know is angle A. So I have everything in the equation, and I only have one variable. So now, once again, I'm going to reduce the equation. 12 squared is 144. I'm going to take 27 squared plus 20 squared, add those together to get 1,129. I'm going to multiply negative 2 times 27 times 20 to get negative 1,080. And then the cosine of A here is my variable. Once again, remember, I cannot take 1,129 and subtract the 1080 because it's being multiplied by the cosine. But I can subtract the 1,129 from the 144. So I will do that. Now I can divide by 1080, and I'll get the cosine of A is 0.9120. Once again, I don't really care what the cosine of A is. I really want to find out what the measurement of angle A is. So I'm going to use that second cosine on my calculator, or the arc cosine, and I'm going to find out that the measurement of angle A is 24 degrees. Now that I know what the measurement of A is, now I would have enough information to finish this using the law of sines, which would be the best way to go about this. Why don't you put this video on pause and see if you can do example 3 all by yourself. All right, let's see if you did it right. So I'm going to write in what I know. I know B is 124, A is 25, C is 22. I have a side angle side configuration, which clues me in that I should use my law of cosines. I'm given angle B, so I'm going to set this up to find side B. Plug in everything I know. Now remember, everything on the right side of this equation is just a number. There are no variables on this side. So it's just a matter of putting all of this into your calculator. I tend to do it in pieces like this to keep me straight, but if you are efficient enough to put it in your calculator all at once, that's great. Once again, don't forget that what you have here is b squared, not b, so you're going to have to take the square root of both sides. Make sure you show me that you understand that a quadratic equation has two answers, but you are taking the negative answer and discarding it because it doesn't make any sense in the context of this problem. So now you know that side B is 41.5. So if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, let's take a look at a couple of word problems and see how we can work through a word problem. So Mary is orienting across a large flat plane from marker A to marker B, and it says on the bottom, orienting is a competitive sport in which participants find their way to various checkpoints. After walking 1.8 miles, she realizes she is 6 degrees off course. To the nearest tenth of a mile, how far from marker B is she when she realizes her error? All right, so she went 1.8 miles. She's 4 miles between A and B, and she's 6 degrees off course. So if you take a look at this triangle that's made, you see you have a side angle side configuration. And if you have a side angle side configuration, you're going to want to use your law of cosines. So because I want to find side A, this is the equation I'm going to use. My variable is A, so all of this stuff on the right side of the equation is just a number. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify that number, and I find out that A is plus or minus 2.2. But again, I'm going to discard the negative answer because it doesn't make sense in the context of this problem. So I find out that she has to go 2.2 miles to get back on course.